Welcome to the Charity Changemakers Podcast, the show where we dive into the journeys, challenges and successes of the leaders shaping the sector today. Each episode I'll be sitting down with the senior charity leaders to hear their stories, uncover their insights and explore what it really takes to drive change today. And if you enjoy the podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe, like and share to help us reach as many people as possible and showcase the incredible charities that are coming on the show. So whether you're a charity professional, a trustee, thinking about joining the sector or making that next step in your career, or just passionate about making an impact, then this podcast is for you. Let's get started. I'm absolutely thrilled to be delighted today by Tarn Bright, who's the co-chief executive of Home for Good and Safe Families. Tarn brings a lot of energy and enthusiasm and laughter to the conversation, so I know you're absolutely going to enjoy this conversation that we share in together. Tarn's really honest, really open, shares some of the really difficult circumstances that she found herself in as a 16-year-old and the mission that gave upon her life to later want to make a difference, to make sure that no young person ever faced some of the circumstances alone that she went through herself. From making and getting a break within the corporate sector to making that transition into the charity world, into a variety of different roles and leadership positions that has led her to being now the co-CEO of Home for Good and Safe Families. I invited Tarn on the show because I read and heard about the merger between Home for Good and Safe Families, and it looked like there was so much good stuff going on there that I just thought there was so much that we could take from their learnings that might be of interest to others and other organisations within the charity sector. Look, you're going to really enjoy this conversation. So this is enough from me. Let's get on and meet our change maker. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Tarn Bright today, who's the co-chief executive of Home for Good and Safe Families. I've got that right, haven't I?
You have, exactly right.
Yeah, brilliant, good. Yeah, I've been practicing that, so I'm pleased I got that right. And Tarn, I'm really delighted to have you on the podcast today. Do you want to just take a minute or so to introduce who you are, what you do, where you work?
Yeah, sure. So Tarn Bright. The first thing I share with people, which is the most important still yet in my life, is that I'm a mum to two sibling brothers who I adopted after having fostered them in the first instance. So I went from a fostering carer to an adoptive parent, and that got me into the world of, my goodness, children's services.
Yes.
And from there, things developed, and whilst I ran a consultancy company for a number of years in social justice activity, 5 years ago now nearly, I became the chief exec of Home for Good.
Yes.
And that's what I've been doing, as well as being a local community activist and friend. I'm mum and now co-CEO.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, it's a good line. There's going to be loads of just to unpick from there, and I guess that coming together of your personal experiences and where you work now, which would be absolutely fascinating to hear more of as we move through the conversation. We do have some quick fire questions that we like to fire away at people that come along. These have been chosen actually from the listeners from season 1. These questions, and all the guests have sort of faced the same ones. So the first one is, what are you listening to or reading at the moment?
Oh, Adam, I've actually on Amazon gone and bought 4 books from the same author, which really unlike me because reading time is a little bit thin on the ground. But I have come across a man called Mo Gaudat, and
Right.
He is the ex-Google, I think they call him a chief business officer. So the ex-chief business officer of Google. And he has, in effect, gone from being all things IT, AI whiz, still is those things,
Yep.
but has become somebody so deeply ingrained and embedded in learning how to develop happiness.
Yep.
But largely through the lens of how we manage our own narrative, our own stories. What do we tell ourselves? What do we tell our brain about things? And he's been through some really quite traumatic life experiences. And so the book I'm currently reading is called Unstressable by Mo Gaudat. And it's amazing.
Yes, right.
I wish I'd read it 20 years ago.
Well, I mean, that sounds like an amazing recommendation, particularly for the charity sector. Unstressable, right? Okay, we're
Yes.
all everyone's off Googling it now. So yeah, brilliant. No, that's great. Good. Well, lovely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's brilliant. I love this question. What is a quality that you had as a child that you still have now as an adult?
You know, I've thought about this long and hard, more so than any of the other questions.
Yes.
And it may not call it a quality, but it's called, I'm just going to say, laughter and joy. I remember, Adam, being such a young girl and finding joy in really daft and silly things. So much so I would be told quite often as a very small child to stop laughing so much. It's almost inappropriate, you know, we're in a quite intense situation or somewhere that's, you know, at the supermarket, and I would burst out laughing. Yeah. And I'm 52 now, Adam. And somebody just the other day said to me, goodness, Tarn, you're good value, aren't you? And I said, what do you mean by good value? And they said, I always turn around and you're either chatting to someone in an animated fashion or you're laughing. And I thought to myself, do you know what, Adam, that hasn't changed. I still see the joy in most things. And I just love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one of the things that we're finding, it's a great question. One of the things we found, episode 8, I think, for this season, actually, those qualities that people are then able to instill into their leadership values, lead within, you know, a whole variety of different contexts, whether that's, you know, obviously now within charity sector, but people that come from nursing or teaching, or, you know, those childlike qualities actually have really carried and been a huge part of who they are. And I suspect, as we move through the conversation, we'll hear much of the same in this conversation, which is just brilliant. So, I mean, it sounds like you've got quite a lot going on. Obviously, there's been merger of charities, busy family life, clearly busy role, lots happening in local community. But if you've got a completely free day, I realise they might be few and far between. How are you spending it?
Well, I do actually have a clear day on Saturday, so this is really easy to answer. So I am going to the beautician to have a facial at 9:00 on Saturday. Yeah. And then from there, I'm going to the gym because I'm currently in training to do a tandem ride with my co-CEO from the south to Scotland in July. Wow. And Adam, this is the equivalent of someone who's built for comfort, not speed. And Kat, my co-CEO, who's built for speed, not comfort. Yeah. So I'm the one that's having to do all the training. So 9:00 beautician, then probably 10ish the gym. And then I've booked in a sauna and ice cold plunge experience.
Yes.
Then I'm going to my best friend's for afternoon tea. And then I'm going to the comedy club, which is the favourite place that I go to. Just that theme again, isn't it? Of laughter and joy, right?
Yeah.
So that's my Saturday when I have no responsibility.
Blimey. Yeah, you've packed it full of stuff. There's no time there for a rest, right? Yes, yeah.
But glorious things in it, though.
Yeah. I feel like the best question I'm going to ask in the whole of this podcast is probably coming right up. When you co-CEO and lead an organisation together and then do a fundraiser together on a tandem, who gets to steer?
Well, listen, this is gonna tell you everything. That is a world award-winning athlete. So she's got a gold award for powerlifting.
Right.
So she's the real deal.
Yeah.
But she's also an amateur cyclist, and so for fun. She cycled last June from the east coast of Africa to the west coast of Africa.
Yes.
28 days on a saddle the size of a piece of brie.
Yeah.
And she loved it. And she came back with nerve damage in her little fingers where obviously holding, in effect, your handlebars for 28 days. But she's remarkable. So can you imagine my fear and trepidation when we came across this idea, together stronger, we can go faster, further together, right? And so what brilliant idea was to be fundraising through a tandem ride. But the deal was this. Tarn, I'm sorry, I have to be at the front, she said. Tarn, as long as you can learn to not wobble at the back and you put as much foot power into this as I will at the front, we'll be absolutely fine. So she hands down is in control of the tandem ride.
Yeah, excellent.
So that probably that says a lot, right?
That's how it's going to be. Yeah. I mean, you can stop pedaling surely at the back and enjoy the surroundings of you.
thing is, you've got to put your feet up really high because those wheels go the pedals go around really fast, right? Yes. So we had a little bit of an experiment a few months ago as we've both been in training, or certainly I've been in training for this. And I got my foot stuck and the pedal went right into the back of my Achilles heel, as it then did Kat. So there's a certain knack if we're going to be wanting to do this over 4.5 days.
Okay, it's not so it's not a lot of time to get there, is it? But yeah, okay, good. Well, look, I had absolutely. I love how we ended up here. I never know where the conversation on these podcasts is going to go. Presumably, there's a fundraising page that I need to put a link in the show notes to that so people can get along to. So
I would love it if you would do that. Thank you. Yeah, it's Cat Pound. It's called the Gear Change Challenge.
The Gear Change Challenge. Brilliant, excellent. Well, hopefully everyone is. We'll listen to the end of the podcast, but hopefully you're all off now, googling that, getting your donation in, and we'll look forward to tracking that later in the year. So when are the dates? When is it that you're
July the 18th to the 23rd?
Right. Okay. Excellent.
And hence that's why I've become a new member of a gym.
Yes.
I wasn't before January.
Oh, great. Well, no, sounds brilliant. I look forward to tracking tracking how that goes. So no, fab. Well, thank you for sharing it. We love those questions. So it's just great to be able for listeners, obviously, to get to know the guests a little bit better and a bit of insight. Which always leads into this next question: is kind of how did you get into the charity sector? Which I think we've recorded about 20 odd of these shows so far. And obviously, I interview candidates day in, day out. It's very rare that I speak to anybody that goes, "Yeah, I absolutely knew that I wanted to work in the charity sector when I was a child, and that was always my aim." It's always interesting to hear what that journey looked like. For people that come on the show. Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it? Because way before I was in the children's sector, I was in the charity sector from really my mid-30s. And so, I guess 20 odd years now I've been in the charity sector, the last 5 specifically in the children's sector. But my story is one where, as a very young teenager, I found myself in a set of experiences, Adam, that meant that I was making really poor choices. And by 16, I found myself in bouts of homelessness. Sofa surfing, away from home. I never actually went back home again, as in I never sort of moved back home again for any period of time after I left, just after my 16th birthday. And I found myself in some really complex, very, very frightening and isolating situations over a couple of years. And I still to this day recall the oath that I made to myself. And it was, I never, ever want any young person to feel as lonely as this. And it was during a particularly bad bout, Adam, where I was being groomed into the sex industry. And the oath was, if ever I find myself in a situation where I can, with my own agency, help other teenagers, children or young people, then I will do that, because I never want any young person to feel as lonely as I do now. And it's funny because I actually went, in one sense, straight from that. I mean, there was quite a sort of when I say miraculous, I wasn't a faith back then, but there was a miraculous turnaround. And within a couple of months of finding myself in this nightclub, sort of driven working environment that I was in, I found myself in a professional office, temping, in like an, office junior, the title used to be, Adam. This is some years ago now. And I had no typing skills, no secretarial skills, nothing at all. But I blagged my way in saying that I could type. And suddenly found myself in an aspirational environment that I hadn't ever been in. I'd been for the last 2 years. So I was 18 at this point, Adam. For the last 2 years prior to that, I'd been in some of the most sordid working men's clubs and, And so by the time I walked through the front doors of this sort of glass partitioned, sort of sculptures in the hallway of the, and people in suits and talking fast and eloquently and with dynamism and passion. And I just realised, I can do this. I've got so much more to me than this. I can do this. And I literally went from office junior and within 3 years was running one of the largest departments of a FTSE 100 national company, which then became an international company. as they then merged, talking about mergers a bit later. And so I became part of a sort of a change management team who merged two very large organisations together and ended up travelling around the world by my mid-20s, negotiating global contracts.
Yes.
Who'd have thought? Who'd have thought? Who'd have thought? With not one, well, I say not one GCSE. I was the first year of GCSEs, and I think I got, what's it, under C's, the fair splattering of D's. But so I did a decade in the corporate world, and very grateful for that, Adam, to this day, because then what I took into the charity sector was actually some really well honed skills and knowledge around things like budget management, spreadsheets, supervision, value added, all of these things that actually they became really good foundations for me to then go on and lead within the charity sector. So I then became a minister for a while as well within the Elim Pentecostal movement. So I was a minister for 5 years. But then after that, in my mid-30s, I went into the charity sector and have worked with everyone from the Salvation Army. I've run a chain of schools in deprived communities. I've worked with Syrian refugees. I've worked for the Diocese of London, overseeing their social action strategy across 400 parishes. And then, as I said, 5 years ago, took on Home for Good. That's now literally brought us up to date as to how I entered into the charity sector.
Yeah, that's right, indeed. Blimey, so much in there. And within that time within the corporate world, and that, like you say, from blagging your way in as a junior office worker through there. I mean, was that just opportunities arose, or there was particular people that invested, saw something in you, invested in you, or what was it that you could see that progression within, when you talk like a decade, within that sort of space, that sounds like quite a quick progression through the
It really was. And you're absolutely right to ask the question, was it people or was it me being highly opportunistic? Well, I had such a low sense of self-esteem. 18, when you're embarrassed to literally tell anyone what your last 2 years has been like, to the point where I just wouldn't talk about it. But also I wasn't altogether that honest at that stage about how old I was, because I didn't want people to know how young I was. Because when you're suddenly running a large team of other secretaries by then and, ran a large department, there's a sort of gravitas that comes with age. And by then I was in suits and high heels and I knew how to dress. But I would say it was two things. One, I could not bear the thought of going back to some of the types of experiences, Adam, that I'd had. It's almost like from a very young age, I'd seen and experienced the worst of humanity. I'd seen and experienced exploitation, and I'd seen and experienced how quickly you could go from a fairly average middle-class kid to really running alongside people who were not kind and not good and were heavily involved in criminality. And the descent was so quick, Adam, that the minute I then found this sort of like this opening, this sort of like aspirational world, this world of people who were going places, who had something about them that was ambitious. Now in the charity sector, I can see in one sense, listen, I've got a different type of purpose now. But back then at that age, it was still a good thing for me to be around people who had ambition. I just hadn't had it before. I didn't know what that was, to step out of my comfort zone and step into environments that were uncomfortable. And that's what those first couple of years in the corporate world did for me. But it was people too.
Yes. Yeah.
There were two people particularly I remember. One was a lady called Christine Sherman and one was a man called Lionel O'Neill. Now, the fact that, again, all these years later, I can still remember exactly what they did for me. Yeah. I can remember how they laughed. I can remember their turns of phrase. I can remember the depth of love that they had towards me, that I had done nothing to earn. Yeah. I was still a bit on the edge, to be honest. I was a bit gobby. Didn't quite sort of worked out that, you didn't still then wear, I used to wear a ring on every finger. Do you remember the sovereign rings, Adam?
Yes,
So you're too young for this. This is back in the 80s and 90s, right, where sovereign rings were very fashionable, right? And part bravado and part sort of, in one sense, the externalizing of wealth. I gathered a whole load of sovereign rings. well, that doesn't go down well in the corporate world. No one wants this, young manager sort of like armed up with gold, as it were. And so Christine Sherman was given to me as a business coach. Yes. And she would sit me down and she would say, now we need to do some, what she would call self-marketing.
Yeah.
And that's funny. I still coach out of this now, Adam, all these years later. How you dress matters. How you look matters. How you speak to people matters. And she literally took me from the most basic of people skills, you could call it actually, through to really, really intelligent managerial competencies. Yes. She just refused to let me go in all of my mistakes. And oh my gosh, were there some? She didn't let me go. And the same was for Lionel. He gave me a really big break. I ended up working for a team of 4 individuals that Lionel oversaw. And I was in effect their executive support.
Yeah. Right.
And they traveled around the world, literally around the world. In effect, teaching people how to sell the products, really important job, really important function within the organisation. And I was given the job of looking after all of them, their travel, their presentations, content, logistics. If I got one of those logistics wrong on a day they turned up to Nigeria, had a really high power presentation to give, and I hadn't got things exactly right, there were big consequences.
Yes.
But Lionel, again, stuck by me. I've still got sculptures and pictures that he bought me from years and years ago. As he said to me, Tarn, you're not just Tanya, but you are the bright in your Tanya.
Yes.
And it meant the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, like you say, when you get that backing from seniors within an organisation and that investment, that it just helps, helps people to progress. But clearly saw like you say, saw something in you,
spark.
And that spark. Yeah, absolutely. That made work fun as well, right? Which is important. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which can be hard to come by in the corporate world at times, I guess. And
it can be intense.
So there for a decade, but obviously you talked about earlier in the conversation about you made this oath earlier in life about never wanting a young person to feel as lonely as you had in those moments. Obviously working in the corporate world, and then you talk about this transition back into the charity sector. So those charities that you just realised, I think vast majority, there's a young person aspect.
Yeah, exactly.
To who they are and what they do. Was that? Yeah. Was the corporate world not scratching that itch for you, which is why that transition came, or what happened?
Yeah, it never left me, that sense of wanting to be able to support people that were more vulnerable than I was, because I had felt the vulnerability. See, this wasn't me wanting to serve, Adam, out of some sort of superior, let's call it the rescue motivation, which, I'm not saying that's a bad reason to get into working for charities, because we've all got our own motivations as to why we do things. But it never left me in that decade at Diageo. It never left me that I wanted to do something more meaningful. And as time went on, by year 6 and then 7 and year 8, you can only save so much money, because I ended up as a buyer. You can only save so much money of an already very wealthy company before you begin to think, I'm not quite sure I'm feeling the purpose here. However, I was really grateful, because the leadership and the coaching that I just absorbed, and I grew a huge amount through. But certainly by my late 20s, I felt what I would only now describe as the nudge of God. And it was the nudge that said, you are still yet made for something different than this. Yeah. Be grateful for what you've had. But, I want you to go to Bible college. That was what I felt God's sort of impress upon me. And so I did. My global procurement director, Noang Lobsang, his name was. I used to just love saying his name. He was a lovely man as well. He looked at me and he said, you are bonkers, Bright. What are you doing? Like, you're going places. What are you doing? I'm not letting you go from the global team. I said, Noang, I can't stay. I feel so committed to working on myself and my relationship, my spirituality, my relationship with God, but in helping others. And I can't do it here. And so I went to Bible college for 3 years in Australia, got myself sorted, shed a lot of stuff, dealt with a lot of trauma that I'd probably just packed away, to be honest, and hadn't really dealt with. Came back from Bible college 3 years later and became a minister. And actually so interesting that, some ministers become really focused on preaching or teaching or whatever. I just went straight into community community engagement. And that's where my heart came alive, Adam. I worked in some of our most complex estates as was West London, where I was based. And I lived literally my life with people who were marginalised, overwhelmed, isolated, worked with the homeless population. And I set up a group, actually, which ran for a very long time after me, about 30 churches in the local area, all to work together.
Yes.
It had such impact in our local community. We got money from the local authority, painted murals, did youth work. It was chaos, but incredible. Yeah. And that then led me on into actually 5 years after doing that, I set up a community home with two of my best friends, Heidi and Ed, a married couple. And out of the overflow of our relationship, the goodness of our relationship, which is still as strong as ever to this day, they're my absolute besties on the planet. And we applied to the local authority together and to others to foster.
Yes.
And as it ended up happening, we ended up with a home in Peckham, rented a big home in Peckham, when there were far more complex issues in Peckham than there are today. I mean, there's still some, but, postcode wars around gang, gun, knife crime was really prolific in Peckham at the time where we moved there. And we, in effect, moved into our home homeless teenagers. Yes. So any young person 15 plus referred to us by the local authority or the YMCA or a local bed and breakfast in the Elephant and Castle, a youth worker from there rang us one day and just said, I've got a young lad, Eritrean Muslim lad. He's travelled across the world, in order to find stability. He's got no one with him. And he's going to be at risk of being drug runned if we don't get him out of this, where the council have put him in this big old big old bed and breakfast in Elephant and Castle. And I remember saying, Mike, send him round. And we had no funding stream for him at that point. Yes. And then he moved in with us and stayed for a long time. Yeah. And he's now in his mid-30s. Incredible. We've got a flat in Borough. He's doing brilliantly. But we've got loads of stories like that, Adam. And so literally from my mid-30s, the dream or the oath became an activated part of my life expression. Yes. And then from there, as well as doing that, I worked for Charities as well.
Yes, yeah. Which eventually led to becoming chief executive of Home for Good, as it was at that point. And obviously one of the reasons that I really wanted to invite you onto the podcast was to talk about obviously merger between Home for Good and Safe Families, because we're seeing more of it, I think, across the sector where organisations come together. So. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you say, obviously where there's those moments where, from a funding point of view, it makes sense, or delivery of service, or that bringing together of different services and teams, and for these organisations to exist and services to exist for beneficiaries in the long term. Yeah. So I'd love to dive into that as an area. There's never going to be probably a single podcast that's long enough to go over a single area, because these things aren't straightforward, are they?
No.
I'm chief executive of Home for Good. Talk me through the beginning part of that, and then I guess how this merger journey sort of started.
Yes, well, so I was into about my third year of leading Home for Good, and we'd had some great successes, finding incredible individuals, couples, and families, Adam, to open up their heart and their homes, as we call it, because it really is both. You can't have one without the other. You might have a home, but not much of a heart for it. That's no good. Yeah. You might have a heart for it, but you haven't got a spare room. That's no good, right? So, but we had some huge encouragement just as to how the church at large responded to what I would call the gospel imperative, the heart imperative, to care for the most vulnerable. And of course, that is children who have no advocate, no one to, in effect, have their voice heard as it should. And yet the problem was, Adam, is however hard we worked, the numbers just keep increasing.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not particularly political, so this isn't a party political broadcast, but the 16 years prior of the previous Conservative government, numbers had just kept increasing, and this year they've in England dropped marginally, but sadly begun to increase again. So like a couple of years ago, Adam, I was just thinking, this is bonkers. We as the church, as much as that we are absolutely wanting to open up our heart and our homes, Adam, I just kept thinking we've got to go upstream. We've got to do top of the cliff, not bottom of the cliff.
Yeah.
And I prayed in one sense that God would show opportunity, or rather I prayed that I would just stay open, that I would be open to explore different ways of running the organisation. I would be open to exploring innovation and entrepreneurial ways of running things differently to ultimately address the issue at the top of the cliff as well as the bottom. And before long, I went to a prayer breakfast in Greenwich, just a great place to meet church leaders. And there was this lady presenting. And I do not mind telling you that I had a pang of mild annoyance because she was really rather good. And every word that she sort of used, belonging, nurture, love, support, radical commitment. I thought, my gosh, has she picked up one of my, like, you know, I've just given a talk very similar to this. And the more I listened, I thought, my goodness, I need to speak to this individual because this is just outstanding what she's talking about. And the quality and the class of her as a leader came across as well. And she, of course, was Kat, who was the CEO of Safe Families. And she tells this story. I mean, I remember the prayer breakfast, but she remembers it in real detail. Apparently, I walked up to her and I said something along the lines of, "Hi, Kat, Tarn. Loved what you said. I think we should merge." And she said, and then this big laughter sort of like, you know, peeled out. She was like, I thought you were serious, but I couldn't quite work it out. Anyway, we did meet a few weeks later, and then months, you know, we regularly began to meet to pray and talk together. And within about 6 months after that, Adam, we had actually realised that together we could do so much more. We could meet the life cycle needs of children. We could prevent them through 5,000 volunteers, hopefully a high proportion preventing children entering care by reducing crisis and chaos within the family environment, and ultimately serving people who are in isolation and overwhelmed so that children begin to get seen and heard in their family unit again. And that was primarily where the merger came about. And then the life cycle needs could then be met by Kat then said, oh my goodness. But then when sadly, as it will always happen, children always will still yet enter care, Home for Good, like, oh my goodness, that strong, God-focused, ethical, heart-loving response of individuals, couples and families being able to come around some of the most traumatised children that we have in this country. And to us, it was a no-brainer. But then, of course, we had to do the whole, you know, how do we even begin to now start explaining this bright idea as much as we felt it was? But our board, our respective boards were fantastic. Our two chairs then got together individually without me and Kat. We wanted them to meet to talk it through. And Adam, they met. And just after one meeting, they came back to us and said, yeah, you're definitely onto something. And then it took a year from there to September 2024, where we legally merged.
Which is still quite a quick process. I would say, but I guess that, and this is the first time I'm hearing it, I guess that's because there's an openness there between you and Kat, and then the respective chairs. My sense is that charities, organisations can quite often build some barriers about, well, no, this is us, this is how we do it, this is our patch, and there's a protectiveness about protecting that. But actually, clearly, you were all very beneficiary driven about, well, we can provide a better service working together, and that was there was the motivation, and it wasn't coming from a point of, we've got to merge to survive.
No, I think that was the key difference. And I actually just gave a seminar yesterday for an organisation called Action Planning. They just wanted a purist seminar just on how do you merge. And one of the things that I shared at that, Adam, was there's nothing wrong with merging if there is a financial challenge for one or both organisations. If it means you're going to be able to maintain running a programme or producing a product which is high quality and you don't want to lose it, that's no bad. It's not failure, right? It just happened in our instance. It really was about the fact that together we had a stronger proposition to the government, local authorities, and to the church. So it meant, Adam, that literally when I write a script now, I've got one voice. I can talk about prevention, intervention, and permanence in one conversation and say, yes, we can address all of those areas for you. And this is the model that we use. So the thing that is important then around the board conversation is, because Kat and I were able to articulate that to the board, we could also bring really strong evidence as to how we thought this could work. We used data to have strong conversations, i.e. we could show certain cost efficiencies by running the organisation together, because you don't need two finance departments. You don't need, two contracts for mobile phones or whatever it might be.
Yes.
And whilst, again, it wasn't driven financially, when you can show a board that not only is there deeper missional impact that provides sustainability for the core objects of the charity, and do it in a way that brings process and cost efficiency and reduces the need for the church to pick charities. Yes. We're all after the same church platform, Adam. Every single one of us who runs a charity. Oh, not. Could I have a little gap on your Sunday morning, please? Could I, give a giving ask?
Yeah.
The reality is, Adam, that there was not one thing that pragmatically, however territorial a few board members were in the early days, they didn't want to think that, in one sense, the brand was going to be lost either side. The truth of the matter was, it was so compelling that we really didn't have any of that complexity on our hands around board members who couldn't see it. And I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about for a staff team? Because it can be quite an unsettling process. And I guess this is part of the evolution of, because Home for Good, as an organisation, we're not talking about a 200-year-old organisation.
No, 10 years.
It's evolving, it's moving. I guess there's a fast pace to it. In that sense. How has it been? Because I guess there's been challenges along the way. How has it been in bringing an organisation, both organisations, on that journey?
Yeah, I would say that is the area that we had to work hardest on. Yeah. In one sense, the sort of, due diligence and data and spreadsheet, that's the easy bit. Kat was very wise. She said, Tarn, I think in the very first instance from day one of merger, we need to do a 3-month vision and values tour. I have to admit, I did groan a little bit at that moment because Kat, has a very busy life, but she doesn't have dependents.
Yeah.
And, for her to do a huge amount of travelling to 12 locations across 3 months, that didn't pose logistical challenges for her. But I'm a solo mum to a 12 and a 13-year-old, both with additional needs.
Yeah.
And I listened to her deeply because I could see how important this was to her. But actually, it was more that it was important to her. She convinced me of its importance.
Yeah.
Because the reality was that we did do 12 locations. We travelled around September to December to primary offices, gathered all of the teams in critical spaces and places, and literally shared the vision and asked outright fears, worries, joys, concerns, ideas. What is it you've always loved to see? What is it you haven't seen and would still yet like to? And we gathered such intelligence from across 250 odd staff.
Yeah.
But more importantly, they got to see us in person. They got to ask us eyeball to eyeball. They got to explore any fears they might have. But equally, they got to share with us their aspirations as well. And I look back now and I realise how very wise Kat was to insist that was the first thing that we did. And it was an absolute joy, if not quite exhausting.
Yes.
Because we also talked at length, Adam, about culture. Now, anyone that's done any level of leadership will know that culture eats strategy for breakfast is the same.
Yeah.
By that, all you mean is you can have the best strategy in the world. If you've got a toxic culture, or you've got people that aren't pulling together, or you've got silos, or you've got people that don't understand what their job is entailing. They might be working very hard, but they don't know how they're ultimately serving the core objectives of the organisation. Mm-hmm. Adam, your strategy is worthless.
Yes. Yep.
So the fact that we did the Vision and Values Tour, got our culture sorted, people knew what we expected, people knew what our organisational goals were, actually has proven to be gold dust for us. And so I would recommend anybody bringing your staff along is singularly the most important thing, because they are, particularly in charity land, your people are they're your asset. Yeah. Particularly if you've got frontline staff dealing with families as well, they are your asset. Yeah. And I'm pleased to say that has put us in great stead.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess reflecting on these last few months, then, what's kind of the impact been? I guess from I guess as a whole, from delivering services right through to trying to raise awareness of your cause, of raising funds for the work that you're doing. What's the impact been of merger?
Well, we've got local authorities now who, instead of in one sense having to find different organisations, be it charities or sort of secular organisations, to run different parts of the sort of food chain, if we can call it that. So as again, prevention, intervention, permanence. They are coming to us now, and we're able to holistically share that within local communities, we've got volunteers who could become short-term respite carers, foster carers, which would prevent then children from having to try and attach and bond to a whole load of people who, at the end of the day, Adam, if you're a child and you've had to be removed from your home, you are experiencing trauma. The fewer encounters you have to have in strange environments with strange people, however nice they might be, the better. So now what we can do is, with local authorities, our offer is so much more holistic. So now conversations with local authorities are, going from strength to strength. But importantly, it's the church conversations as well, where churches are, we've had some people feedback to us, oh, it was such a relief, Tarn. We either felt like we had to pick Home for Good or Safe Families, because you're both really good, really cool national charities that are well respected. But now it's like there's one set of training, one voice into the church. But I would say probably, Adam, as much as those things have been really important and will continue to grow in their strength and impact, it's been our influence with central government.
Yes. Okay.
I've been staggered by the conversations that we are now being invited to have by MPs and other ministers with portfolio, who ring us and say, look, off record, what would your take be on this? With this, there's been a children and wellbeing bill going through Parliament and being debated through the House of Lords recently, which has got lots of opportunity for positive legislative change in it. As much as there's been some quite difficult decisions made at a governmental level recently around the reduction of something called the Adoption Support Fund, there's been some big things happening, and we've been able, by invite, to be in the room.
Yeah. Good.
That, Adam, is not lost on me. I do not take that for granted. I count that as one of the greatest privileges that we have, is that we're able to represent the church, 50,000 micro communities of people willing to be disrupted for the betterment of someone more vulnerable.
Yeah.
That's at the end of the day how I communicate this to the government, right? They don't want to know about our gospel pitch. Sure. They don't want to know that. They want to know what are the values of these people and how can they help our communities change. And, what a joy it is, therefore, for us to have got this developing voice now merged, has gone from strength to strength. And so we find ourselves in all sorts of conversations. We were at number 10 Downing Street just the other day, meeting with the Prime Minister at an Easter reception as he was celebrating charities that work within the children and family sector. And it was my privilege to represent us there. Yes. So that has definitely been a gear change for us.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. That's great. And it may well be that people listening to the show here are hearing about Home for Good and Safe Families for the first time, other than, obviously, hopefully they've already put their sponsorship down on the... what ways in which they can get involved, support, help, advocate on behalf of the organisation?
Oh, what a great question. Well, we have 3 what we call calls to action. The first is explore. Might you explore to become a volunteer? That can be anything from an hour a month, could be an hour a week, but a minimal amount of time commitment can have a massive impact if you are coming alongside a family or a mum who's overwhelmed and just needs either a moment of respite or a friendly voice and a cup of tea. So you could volunteer with Safe Families and join the 5,000 plus people that we have serving families and children in your local community, because local authorities refer to us and then we match them with volunteers, and we train people to the nth degree with high quality, high caliber training. So you could explore by wanting to volunteer. Then, of course, for a certain few, fostering, adoption, or caring for teenagers, as I did. It's actually called supported lodgings. Yeah. That might be something that people would be willing to have a conversation on. And if there's even a willingness to have a conversation, Adam, I would encourage people to call the Home for Good inquiry team. The details are all on the website. Yeah. And they will very confidentially answer all and any questions that will be put to them. They hear everything. They are entirely confidential, and they help journey people to the right decision. Yes. And then from there to assessment. Yep. Or that's the first one, explore. Might you explore, volunteer, foster, adopt, or supported lodgings? Or might you give financially? Every 15 minutes, Adam, a child goes into the care system. And so we ask people, would you consider setting up a standing order of £15 a month to represent that number of children entering into the care system? Every 15 minutes, one child enters care. That helps us enormously, standing orders, because that regular income really helps us plan and budget. And finally, would you pray? We have a monthly prayer resource that we send out faithfully to everyone who signs up to pray. And we anonymise information, obviously, but we put real-time examples and real-time prayer needs into that prayer resource monthly. And we've got a beautiful momentum and a beautiful movement that's actually growing now in prayer. So anyone that would feel as though they've got a few minutes they could offer us of their prayer, we would love that. So explore, give and pray.
Yeah, perfect. And we'll make sure that we've got some links, like I say, in the show notes as well, so people could refer back. Tom, we always finish off by asking this same question to guests that come on. If you could go back and speak to yourself at the very start of your career, or give yourself one piece of advice, say one thing, what would it be?
You are enough. You're enough with your gifting, just as you are, with your personality, just as you are. There's only one version of you. And if you try and be someone else or have somebody else's gifting or personality, then the world is going to miss out on the distinct and unique you. Now, I wish at 18 I had just said to myself, you're enough. Just be more of who you are. And I've got there, but it's taken me too long. But yeah, you are enough.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think we've seen that reflected as you shared your career journey through us, and the way that, the transitions that you've made and the places that you've been and the impact that you've had in a whole range of different organisations. So, Tarn, I'm so incredibly grateful for you coming on the show and sharing with us today. We'll all be keeping an eye on the bike ride coming up. Looking forward to seeing how that goes. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Bless you. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Charity Changemakers Podcast. I hope you've been inspired by the incredible work being done across the charity sector. And this episode is proudly brought to you by my business, Charisma Charity Recruitment. We are passionate about delivering top-tier recruitment services to the charity sector that we care so much about. If your organisation is looking for expert support, then we'd love to help. Please do get in touch today. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, please leave a review, and don't forget to subscribe, like and share, because it helps us reach more people and showcase the amazing charities that come on the show. And for more episodes, please visit our website, charismarecruitment.co.uk. So until next time, keep change making.